We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Saturday. Um, we had a great show yesterday with the Gen Z. We had a Gen Z on, and now today we have the opposite end of the spectrum with
The old
Ed.
fart. The old fart. Yeah,
Gen Z to geriatric. And we've
that's
got
right.
Ed with us. And all of them have good information. So, Ed, welcome back. And needless to say, as every week goes by before we talk to you, there's always a bunch of crazy shit going on. So I'm sure you're all fired up about a few things.
Yeah, I've had a bit of a respite from outrage, just dwelling in euphoria land with
Right.
the response to Kamala Harris's candidacy and the outpouring of support in so many ways from so many different quarters, including monetarily. Of course,
Yeah.
here's Trump bragging that he raised 139 million. She does over 300. So and most of it, a lot of it from first-time donors in small amounts, which says even more. Because I'm sure Trump's comes from a few people, whereas Kamala's comes from people who maybe have never given before, and they're giving a small amount, so it actually represents more people than what Trump's getting.
Absolutely. I mean, you can have all the big donors you want. If you have 10 people that give you $1 billion, that's one thing. But I'd rather have a billion people giving you $1.
Yeah.
Because and that's not a good example. She doesn't have a billion donors, but the fact is she has a lot of small donors, and that translates into more votes. Quite simply, that's just simple math, and that's about all I can handle.
Right, and we have to have a gigantic turnout. We have to have a blue wave because we keep winning the popular vote and losing the electoral college. Mostly through skullduggery, I will say, but still it happens, and that's why it has to be overwhelming so that it can't be denied.
I did a TikTok today and see if you agree with me here. Having experienced or having some history with narcissists, I understand their arc. They're
Yeah,
flying high for a long time, and then they come to the peak, and then they start to spiral. People start getting tired of their shit, and they ultimately crash. And I think we are moments away from Donald Trump's crash when we look at the things going on. Things are no longer going his way. He's not the media darling. We've got Kamala Harris that's getting all the attention. We've got polls going the opposite direction. Kamala's raising more money. There's more excitement behind Kamala. And what that does to Donald Trump is it turns him into a cornered rat where he will flail and fight and hurt himself and hurt everybody around him. And I think we're at that stage right now.
I do too. After witnessing his performance at the Black Journalist Get Together, that was obvious. I mean, give the guy a gun and he blazes away at his own foot. I mean, this is, I can't imagine what his handlers were doing off stage while he was blathering out there about race and various things. Guaranteed to outrage anybody with a sense of propriety at all. So, yeah, he didn't help himself there except with his very, very, very base.
Well, in the story I heard, he went on an hour late
Yeah,
because he was arguing with them because he wanted them to promise not to fact check him while he was on the interview, which is
right.
ironic. I don't want to talk about the facts and don't check me on them. I just want to talk and you can get your big ratings for me. But then he was pulled off the stage at the 25-minute mark and he was supposed to go a full hour. He was pulled
Right.
off the stage by his own people because somebody had the audacity of bringing up Project 2025 and they pulled him off because of that. Now, with all the other shit going on, Project 2025 is one of his big problems, but that's
Yeah.
not his only fucking problem now.
No, no. No, actually, yeah, I mean, this lame excuse they gave something about an audio thing like that, nobody believed. And everybody knows that he is so tied to Project 2025, regardless of how much denial he comes out with. I mean, it's like all of his people put it together. It's like the majority of the people involved with it served in his administration, for goodness sakes. Um, I see where you're going with that. I listened to your TikTok. I agree with it 100%. I'm happy to say haven't known that many narcissists. I've known a few, and you're right. At some point, they miss the attention if it's not focused on them, and they will do anything to get it.
Well, Donald Trump reacted like a prototypical narcissist because when he sat
Mhm.
down in that interview, she listed all the things off he said that he couldn't really answer for. And he did what
Right.
every narcissist does. He gets mad, he attacks, and he diverts. And that's
Right.
exactly what he did. And that's when you know they're losing because they're
Yeah.
cornered. And I've said this all along. If we had one fucking news person or moderator to do that to him in 2015, we wouldn't be here right now. Donald Trump would have imploded in 2016, never would have been president, and we could have saved ourselves a lot of trouble. Finally, people are starting to push back, and he can't fucking handle it.
Right, and we have to emphasize this every time it comes up. Donald Trump was a media creation.
Right.
He was created by the guy who put together his TV show, and then once he announced his candidacy, because he was quote newsworthy, outrageous, got people to tune in. He became the media darling, and there was no criticism because they wanted him to keep talking with them,
Right.
appearing on their air, as it were, as we used to say in radio, so that they could, sell the time for more, and it was purely a commercial thing. They had a responsibility as quote news organizations to render the truth, not to basically put a gild the lily as far as Trump went, and not challenge him on his outrageous statements and so forth, which very few did. And they bear some responsibility, which we should keep mentioning to them. I mean, people go at Fox News now and say, well, you're not news and so forth. And we knew that back then,
Right.
right? But we have to do that with all the others too. We have to, the debate with Joe Biden and Trump, the moderators there did nothing, as Trump spewed nothing but lies, and there was no pushback. Now, I don't know if they agreed to that or what, but there should have been some sort of acknowledgement that no, that's not true. We know that's not true. Here are the facts. It has been rendered over and over and over again that the election was not stolen. You just said it was. That's a lie.
Yeah.
People have to continue to hold his, or have to start holding his feet to the fire every time. Every time. The evening news every night should have a feature of Donald Trump's biggest lie today.
Yeah. Today. Well, Donald Trump, you're right. And that's what I've said before. Donald Trump was a media darling. Not that he was so darling, but he was more of a dancing monkey that brought in,
Yeah,
put butts in seats, so to speak.
right.
And as long as he was putting butts in seats, he was going to be encouraged to do that. But with everybody, people love to build people up, but they even love more tearing him down. And that's the stage that Donald Trump is in. His dancing monkey show has become boring and old.
Yeah.
And now Kamala has become the media darling, which is a
Yes.
positive thing, but everything's going to be focused on her. And this is where everything goes to shit for the narcissist. People to get tired of their shit, they start to fail, and then it drops off quickly because they flail and fuck themselves over. And that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing.
Exactly. Now, we also know the media is very fickle. They can turn on a dime.
Yeah.
All it takes is for one thing that Trump comes up with, or one of his surrogates comes up with, to stick to Kamala, and they'll go after that, and then they smell blood in the water, and so forth and so on. I don't think there's much there. I mean, that isn't manufactured and isn't. If they will show a little bit of responsibility, you don't have to report everything Donald Trump says. You can ignore him, which
Right.
is largely what they did with other people that have been against him. They will feature him And I mean, remember during when he was running against Hillary, they were carrying all of his news conferences, all of his rallies. They were
Right.
carrying them all, not all of hers, but all of his, because they thought people would tune in. And the reason people tune in is because they feature him. You know, it's a circle, and it's a hideous circle that needs to be broken. We need to get back to the idea that there is truth and there is falsehood, and it's the job of the news person, of the media, to point out which is which.
Right.
It's that simple. And it's not hard, not in this case.
Well, people are waiting. That's one thing I get when people write me DMs and emails. It's like they're waiting for the next shoe to fall, shoe to drop, because there's been so conditioned to when things look good, the world is going to turn to shit. I will say this about Donald Trump. We're talking about a different person, a different climate in this country than we were in 2016 and 2020. It's a different world. Donald Trump may try to come up with shit and say shit, which he's doing with Kamala now, but it falls silent because he's a much weaker person. Too much has been exposed about him, and he's not lent the same amount of credibility. He never deserved credibility, but previously they gave it to him because he was always on the TV. But now he's been exposed for the fool, the fraud, and the racist, misogynist, anti-Semite. He's been exposed for all that, so he's much weaker than he used to be.
That's right. And it's very important for guys like you and me and the guests that you have on who've been around a while and actually experienced some history to keep talking out. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I'm working on a TikTok thing of my own. It has to do with economics. And I decided to Google something from the 70s. I wanted to check on something, check how my memory went, right, as to when certain things began and so forth. So I Googled it, and I knew it was AI, because of what I was, AI would be involved in it. And so I was watching to see exactly what the answer would be. And it talked about the economic changes that came along in the 70s, beginning approximately about 1973 and so forth. And it talked about stagflation and so forth, and which people don't remember, but it was there throughout from the early 70s on up until Reagan was elected, where interest rates went through the roof, and this was basically faulty monetary policy from Paul Volcker, and it was also from and the Fed and so forth, raising the interest rates or letting the interest rates go through the roof, and so forth. And the other thing, when manufacturing started falling apart, and that was on purpose, as corporations decided, okay, we'll take a hit, move everything offshore, and we'll make it up, and at the same time we'll kill the unions and so forth, right? Which at the same time hurts the Democratic Party, because the unions are their major donor and so forth, and it worked out just really well. But in my research, it kept bringing up that it seemed to be telling me that the salvation was in 1981 or 1980 when Reagan was elected, and we went to supply side economics, which we now know, thanks to studies from the London School of Economics, among others, that any country who has ever tried trickle down supply side and so forth, all it does is make for a few very rich people and does no good for anybody else. Right. So AI is basically rewriting history in this case, because what AI does, if you don't know, people, all AI does is sample, and it looks for it's going to say what is truth, what it finds the most of. So if it finds a lot of stuff in support of Reaganomics, supply side economics, trickle down, whatever you want to call it, if it finds a lot in support of that, it's going to reinforce that. And that's what I saw. And it's not true. Reaganomics was horrible for the country. People, you can trace it from the election of Ronald Reagan on down. The middle class stopped creating wealth, in the sense, and I'm saving the rest of it for my TikTok. We can talk about it later. But most people stopped getting wealthier about 1980, right on up until today, but a very few select people got astronomically wealthy. And
Right.
they've used that wealth to sponsor things like the Heritage Foundation and so forth that reinforces the right wing bullshit, if you will. Now, this is our chance. This is our chance to turn things around with Kamala and her vice president. We might have 12 years of Democrats if they get the right vice president. It could happen.
Right.
So
Right.
that's what we've got to concentrate. Everyone who realizes that what I just said is true has to get out and vote, and they have to bring 10 people with them. You got to proselytize. You got to call people up and say, this is our chance to turn it around. Otherwise, we're going to be hungry. Otherwise, we're going to be Venezuela. Otherwise, we're going to be this failed state that has just a few people at the top and everybody else scrounging for a crust of bread.
Don't you think? Don't you think that Joe Biden, even though he may not be getting credit for it now after the election and after Democrats take control, don't you think that regarding supply side economics or trickle down, don't you think that Joe Biden's kind of opened Pandora's box by dealing with the middle class, giving to the middle class, and watching how the economy's going? There's a lot of smoke around and he's not getting the credit. But once the smoke clears after November, they're going to go, fuck. You give money to the
Absolutely.
middle class, the economy's going to go crazy and it's going to
And
drive the wealthy people crazy.
it's obvious if you have a few people with all the money, they pay people not to tax them. The money doesn't do anything for the country. It just works for them. They can get 2 more big yachts or whatever they want to throw their money out. Also, there's nowhere to invest it, and capitalism itself depends on 3% growth every year or it falls apart.
Right.
That's true. Look it up. Okay. And that's not going to happen if wealth is concentrated in just 1%, which is where it largely is now. And it's getting worse every day. We haven't had an increase in the minimum wage for what is it, 14 years now, something like that. And it was negligible anyway. People say, yeah, but I mean, minimum wage is $7 and something, but most places are paying 15. But for how much? Are they paying $15 an hour for 60 hours a week?
Yeah.
Probably.
Right.
And part of 2025, by the way, wants to make a work week 160 hours so that there is never any overtime. They want to work you for 8 days in a row. Near the end of the month, they can lay you off for 5 days or whatever it takes so
Wow.
that you never get paid overtime, right? I
Well,
mean, they're
yeah, they're trying to
this is
game the
it.
system.
Exactly. And they've been gaming it since 1980. And unfortunately, a number of Democrats have bought into it as well, because without unions to back them, they have to go to the same trough for money. And it's unfortunate. And we see the tech giants, as they call them, the Musks and so forth, who are now really getting interested in crypto. They want it all. They want crypto to be everything. And why is that? That is because they can manipulate it any way they want to, and they know it.
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly. And I said this to Andy yesterday, the Gen Z that I talked to. Old Soul brought something up, and I thought, wow, that's really diabolical if it's true. The whole idea of bringing JD Vance in as VP. I keep talking
Yeah.
about this because it keeps fucking with my head.
Yeah.
Uh, but JD Vance was made vice presidential nominee, and that was with the support of Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who are all
Right.
tech billionaires, right? So they put
Right.
and JD Vance is a tech guy, so they put him in there because they want him to be vice president to help Donald Trump. Old Soul is suggesting, well, Donald Trump's 78. He might keel over during his administration. Then all of a sudden, we got tech giants in control of the fucking Oval Office. That sounds crazy. That sounds conspiratorial, but does it really? That's
No, it
not
doesn't.
crazy.
It doesn't at all. I mean, this is not new. One thing that J.D. Vance said a while back was that the country started to go off the rails in 1920 when we started moving away from a purely capitalistic economy and started welfare and all of that. He leaves out the fact that in 1929 the whole thing fell apart because of what the policies that they had. They were creating false wealth paper wealth. Well, no, that's all crypto is. I'm sorry. There is
Yeah.
nothing behind it. There is nothing behind the crypto. I mean, people will say, well, there's not really gold behind or silver behind what we have now. And they're right to an extent. But there is something there. And the full faith of the American system, for one thing, that's not the case with crypto. Number one, it's a worldwide phenomenon, not specific to this country.
Right.
And you can see we've seen people have their wealth completely wiped out several times by crypto because people don't understand it. They don't realize that it can be hacked. We've seen it, and there is no way that you can protect against the next innovation. Okay,
Right.
it just doesn't happen. So this move toward crypto, but you're absolutely right. It's no different than the Gilded Age tycoons who controlled the country back then until they overreached and the Great Depression destroyed a lot of their wealth, right? And
Right.
then the Democrats under Roosevelt had to build it back. And yes, they did move into a socialistic way. In the sense that wealth was spread out over most people. And then from specifically 1948 till 1973, we had 25 years when the average person was creating wealth, and that was largely through starting businesses and owning homes through spurred by the GI Bill, a
Right.
very socialistic move, but it created the greatest economy in the history of the world.
Right, right. Well, you know, the interesting thing about crypto, I've never understood crypto. I've tried to understand it, but here's what I know in my own simplistic mind. Crypto is essentially technology, and
Yeah,
technology is controlled by techno billionaires.
right,
So what they're suggesting is to have our money system or part of our money system be controlled by tech giants. I have a
right.
problem with it. I have a
Yeah.
real problem with it because they have shown to be greedy and only give a fuck about themselves and use us for as chattel. You know,
Yes.
the when it comes to this trickle down and all this stuff, there's one industry that learned about how you need to continue to cultivate where most of the money and most of the support comes from. You know, we're talking about the middle class here, but the lumber industry, they kept cutting trees down and cutting trees down. And then they figured out, fuck, we better start planting trees or we're going to have nothing left to cut down. And that's the same with the middle class. You keep taking their money away and making them weaker, then where are you going to get your money from? Who are you going to sell your products to? And they're short sighted. They don't see that. And hopefully somebody like Joe Biden, and I'm glad that Kamala has repeated what he said about building the middle class out, that she's going to continue with that. That's really what's needed. And once people realize how that impacts the economy, the rich fucks are done.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we have endured as long as we have endured. We're the first ever where the quote people had the power. And people want the average citizen, unfortunately, largely due to the fact that our educational system only teaches about the past, not about current events or even the last 50 years, quite frankly. That they don't understand that the middle class has been under attack for as long as it has. And they buy in, and the right wing feeds them this. Well, it's because of the minorities and the immigrants and the people below you are taking your stuff. You know, and of course it's not true. It's the people above who are taking everybody's stuff.
Right.
That's the truth right there. It's always a top down grab. It's never a bottom up grab. Never. You
No,
know, because the people on the bottom don't have the power. They don't have the way to get to the goods. People on top just have to reach down and take it, and they do. And that is the truth, and that's what has to change. We have to once again start leveling the playing field, and the only way to do that is to tax the hell out of them.
yeah,
And not just a graduated tax, but a wealth tax. You create a ceiling and say anything above this is ours.
right. Well, you know, and the thing about it is people have to understand that wealthy people don't just want a lot of money.
No, they
They
want
want
all the
all
money.
the money. They want all the fucking money. They want all the control. And frankly, by doing that, that's uh, self-destruction, because they will
Mhm.
ultimately destroy themselves as well as the middle class. And we've got to protect them against themselves by taking their fucking money, or at least making them pay the same amount of taxes. If they just paid the same amount of taxes you and I paid and everybody else listening, we'd be
Right.
fine. We'd be
We'd be
fine.
just fine.
Just
Mhm.
treat everybody the same. Isn't that the goal of what government's supposed to be? No one's above the law. No one's above paying taxes. That's the way it should fucking be.
Right, and we're not arguing for a flat tax here because that's a giveaway to the rich. No, what
Right.
we talk about is a proportional tax.
Right.
Okay. And quite frankly, if you're making below 30 grand a year, you pay no tax. Okay. I don't want you to pay sales tax. I don't want you to pay property tax. I don't want you to pay income tax. I don't want you to pay anything. You get a free ride until you hit that mark, because then you're making wealth. You
Right.
bought a house that's increasing in value. Your property is increasing in value, and all you have to do is you will eventually be able to pass that on, and that's why then you create continuing wealth. But right now you can't do that. I just noticed that almost 20% of the homes in Atlanta that were sold this past year went to three corporations that didn't exist 3 years ago. And what they
Wow.
do is buy up the starter homes. It started back, when we had um, the Great Recession, and we had all of the subprime mortgage and all of that crap. When the housing industry bubble burst, well, these companies sprang up and started buying those properties. Now they just rent them, they don't sell them.
Right.
So they've closed off that way to create wealth by owning a home, owning property. And stepping up as your income improves, you can sell that starter home to someone who's just starting out, and you move up. Older folks may get a condo, or they may get a bigger house when they have kids and so forth. This is the greatest spur to the economy there could possibly be, and they're closing the door on it. This
Right.
is what corporations are doing, and the corporations are just a reflection of the rich people who are investors in them. Don't get me started on BlackRock and Bank of America and Merrill Lynch and all of these companies that are simply raping the American economy.
I want to change channels here and go a different direction, because you and I were talking about something before we went on with the show. And this is the one thing that I get the most comments about lately. I'm convinced there are people that no matter how good things are looking, they're constantly looking for something to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little disappointed in Rachel Maddow when she gave her presentation of these 70 election deniers that are in different parts of the country, and they're going to stop the certification of the election. Donald Trump will win, and it'll be a horrible situation. And I have a problem with Rachel Maddow doing that. I have a problem with everybody else trying to stir that up, because it's not as big a problem as these people are making it out to be.
Well, no, I agree with you 100%. And, I watch Rachel's show on Monday nights. I used to watch her nightly show. I think she does a good job in some ways. I used to listen to her when she was on the radio. She does a good presentation, except she doesn't know when to shut the fuck up. I'm sorry. Let
Like so many
somebody
in this
else,
business.
yeah,
Yeah.
let somebody else talk. I mean, she spends so much time on the setup that people's eyes glaze over
Right.
sometimes
Right.
before they get to the meat. And yeah, maybe she's trying to scare people into voting. I don't know what the deal is. I tend to think that, like everybody else in media, she gets paid based on the numbers that she makes, right?
Yeah.
And so that is always a consideration. So yeah, fear, outrage, if it bleeds, all of those things are the things that go first. I mean, we'll see disaster. Anything, something bad happens, we will see that video over and over and over and over again,
Right.
and they will ignore the real substantive things like we've been talking about this morning with the economy, that it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. If you're controlled by a corporation, it's still a corporation.
Right, right. Well, so these 70 election deniers, some people are suggesting, well, upend the whole election. And what I try to tell people, and actually, just so people know ahead of time, there's a woman on TikTok. Her name is, she goes by Arlene Unfiltered, and she is a Dr. Arlene, and she
Yeah.
is a political science professor, and she's sharp as hell. And people always ask me, where do you go to? Where do you get information? Well, she just recently come on to TikTok and she knows her shit. So I listen to her a lot, and she's going to be on the show in the coming days, and you'll want to listen for that because she'll make you feel better. But the fact of the matter is all the things that we're hearing that is planned and all the things that are going on isn't something we haven't seen. It's the exact same shit they were doing in 2020. Except the difference is we know ahead of time. We can
Yeah.
prepare ahead of time. Donald Trump was in control. Now Joe Biden's in control. I just don't think people say, well, he's going to cheat. Well, of course he's going to cheat. That's the only fucking way he does anything. But that doesn't mean it's going to really affect things in a negative way in the election. I think the election is going to be so one-sided. It's going to be ridiculous. But this whole concept of finding another thing to worry about just fucking annoys me, honestly.
Me too. Let's have a little positivity. Let's
Yeah.
stick with the positive because that's what will carry us. That's what will carry this election, not dire warnings. Go with the positivity that Kamala brings to this, the pure joy that people are feeling, the relief in seeing someone as vital as she is out there on the stump. And I guarantee you, whether it's Tim Walz or whoever it may be, who I'm pulling for, as her VP, they're going to be out there too. They're all, and she doesn't have a dud in the bunch.
No.
These are all people, any of which who could become president after her when she's done, and also work with her during her own 2 administrations, I'm hoping for. Let's keep that going. Let's keep that positivity going, and we'll be fine. Which is not to say ignore warnings, but make sure that you're doing the things that can deal with that, and that because the right wing is not smart. You
No.
know, they're ruthless, they're sly, but they're not smart. I mean, all they had to do was keep their mouth shut on Project 2025 and not broadcast it to the world. What do? They broadcast it to the world, and everybody goes, geez, that's awful. We don't want that to happen. Even Trump is smart enough to see this is bullshit, but and disavow it. But no, they weren't smart enough to keep they wanted the credit. They wanted to see people, they wanted people to see how smart they are. And when in reality, we see that they are just serving a very small group of people. They're nothing but in the old swashbuckler movies, you know, the Errol Flynn and all of that. There was all this vizier in the background who was, you know, manipulating the doddering old king. That's who these guys are.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly who they are. And, you know, in terms of these 70 people, this ominous number of 70 people, you know how they got this information about these 70 people? From posts they made in social media. Now,
Exactly.
not all of these 70 people are in positions of power. They might be
No.
underlings in this whole thing. But even if they are to come across and try to not certify something, understand that happened in 2022. They all went to court, they all fucking lost, and they were all certified. So to think something different's going to happen when now Joe Biden is in control and with total immunity, I might mention,
Yeah.
to think this is going to be disaster is ridiculous. I mean, it's almost like the boy crying wolf. When they did it the first time, they go, well, maybe it could be true. Now they're going to laugh at motherfuckers about this. And that's what's going to happen henceforth. You can't do it once and fail and then try it again. That's just stupid.
Exactly. And I don't know if people missed it. I think they probably did. But when Joe Biden came out with um, against the Supreme Court with the idea of term limits and so forth,
Right.
that's what's called a warning shot. And
It is.
Roosevelt did the same thing. He threatened to pack the court. He did not do it. And they immediately backed off and let his National Recovery Act go through. They were going to fight it. But he basically said, if you want to keep your job, shut up, you know? And that's basically what Joe is doing here. Now, if they listen, we'll see what happens. If they don't listen, he's got immunity.
Yeah, he's got immunity. And
They
you know,
gave it to him.
well, yeah, they gave it to him. And the thing about it is that as we get closer to this election, and it seems more imminent that Kamala Harris is going to win, you're going to
Yeah.
see them backing down and becoming more docile because they know they're going to have to deal with some shit after November 5th. They know they're going to be on the rack, as it were, because the people of this country are going to be pushing Kamala and the Senate and the House to do something about the Supreme Court. Because whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think a lot of people see we do have some serious problems here, and if we don't correct them, the whole governmental process, the three branches, are in trouble. If one branch isn't working, the other two are going to make it's going to be difficult for them to perform as well.
Right. And that's why when people go to the polls, you can't just vote for the president. You've got to vote all the straight Democratic ticket down to dog catcher. Because quite frankly, we need the Senate and the House too to do what we need to do because
Absolutely.
we have opposition in the third branch of government, in the court. The Republicans own it, or the conservatives, whatever you want to call them, they own it now for the time being. We know that it is possible to impeach Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and perhaps Roberts.
Right.
Because just based on what they have done in taking gifts or through their spouses or whatever, and at the same time ruling on cases from those who before the court from those who are bribing them. It's straight up bribery. We know it. We know that there's a lot of problems with a number of the more recent judges, and that should be pursued. It should be.
I wouldn't be surprised if Clarence Thomas tries to cut a deal, assuming the Democrats win. He has some serious possibilities of getting indicted and his wife getting indicted.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he'd be allowed to do this, but if I'm Clarence Thomas and I'm my age and I'm in the trouble I'm in, say, listen, man, Democrats got it. I'll resign. I'll retire if you don't prosecute me. Now, I don't know if anybody would agree to that because if you prosecute him, he's going to be out anyway. So I don't know if there's any benefit to the Democrats. But these people are going to be pacing around a lot because they're going to see that all this shit that they've drummed up for the last 8 years is going to come back and hit them in the fucking face. And as they watch the polls and they see what's happening, they got to be kind of nervous right now. I know Alito is saying, I might retire. I'm going to retire if Donald Trump comes in. He may retire otherwise because the pressure may be too rough.
Yeah, I think they've got enough on him. I think somebody has gone to him and said, look, we got you. Now you either resign and we'll let you slide, or we'll come and get you. Because Clarence, we already got him. We're not even offering him a deal. We got him. I think Roberts is also vulnerable. I mean, here's his wife taking millions of dollars from law firms to find them personnel. She's basically a law firm headhunter. Millions of dollars, and these law firms all have cases before the court. So, I think that's a vulnerability.
Well, if for no other reason with John Robert, he is the Chief Justice for the worst Supreme Court in history, the most unethical, the most corrupt Supreme Court in history. Why wouldn't you want to get rid of him? I would think the Republicans want to get rid of him too. They'd like to replace him with a Republican, but that's not going to be the possibility.
I mean, anybody who says I'm an originalist should be thrown off the court because it's a bogus position invented by Robert Bork, who we managed to keep off the court, thank goodness. But the whole idea that you only rule on things in the same context of the era in which it was written is incredibly stupid. morally and intellectually bankrupt. And anybody who ascribes to that automatically tells me they're bought and sold and they're paid for by somebody who wants them to rule in a particular way. Because number one, there is absolutely no way that you can figure out exactly what somebody who's been dead for 300 years meant.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, how do you say you're an originalist with a document that's littered with fucking amendments, meaning it's been changed since it was originally written? That's just fucking ridiculous. That's stupid.
Right, and how can a female justice rule on a document that prohibits her from voting, much less
Right.
occupying a judicial seat? No, that's insane. Or that permits slavery, or that so many other things, of course, that we have amended over the years. Obviously, the intent, just making it amendable, meant that the founders realized that it had to be a living document, and as time passed, it would have to be amended, which it has been, and that they couldn't come up with all of the possible rights that people had because the situation for those rights didn't exist at that time. So
Right.
they put that in. They actually said, just because we didn't enumerate it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because we're not omniscient. We don't know.
Right. Well, and it just kind of goes to what Kamala's tagline is now: "We won't go back."
Right.
And the Republicans and the Trumplafucks and of course the courts, the conservative courts, want us to go back to an earlier time, whether it be the 50s or the 1850s. I don't know which one they want us to go back to, but that is no way to run a country. Things change, people are different, people change, and we've got to be able to adjust as time comes. I mean, nobody would ever imagine in 18 or 1777 or 76 that black people would have the opportunity to vote or women would have the opportunity to vote. But nonetheless, they do. So that in itself is a change, not like you said, not tied to the original document. It's just something new that's come along, and it does have to change. I mean, companies have policies that they change all the time because technology and things come. You got to be able to do that. And if you're not, you're stopping progress. And if you're stopping progress, the last motherfucking place you should be is in government.
Exactly. And intellectually, there is no way to argue against that. I mean, you can throw up some bullshit, but quite frankly, there just isn't. Anybody who argues originalism or textualism, either one, it's just bullshit. You have to improvise. You have to go with and whatever. Okay, in the beginning, only property owning white men could vote. So even the working guys, the farmers and so forth, the farm hands couldn't vote.
Right.
You know, the clerks in the stores couldn't vote because they did not own the property. And I think behind that whole thing of keeping the common man from being able to create wealth is maybe headed in that direction. Maybe they want to go back to that at some point, because J.D. Vance is saying if you don't have kids, then you're not invested in the country, and your vote should count less, or the kids should get a vote just supervised by the parents, whatever bullshit he's coming up with. This is insanity, of course, but everything they come out with is a trial balloon so far. Right now, I think I'm living in a kind of like a political lab here in Tennessee where they're trying every damn thing they can come up with to see if they can get away with it. I should tell you, I had mentioned that we had a real contest going for the state Senate seat from my home county. Covers a portion of eastern Tennessee, right?
Right.
And we had this guy who's been in there forever. He was a 30-year naval officer, a small business owner, and he's been in the state Senate for, I believe, 14 years now. He was being challenged by the son of our current congressional representative, Diane Harshbarger. His name's Bobby Harshbarger. Now, they have in common a father and a husband who went to prison for selling cheap Chinese drugs to the VA as American drugs. And Diane should have gone with him. He took the rap. And I think Bobby was probably involved in that whole thing too. He's a pharmacist as well.
Wow.
So, but he was endorsed by Trump. He won. He won the nomination. It was very close, but he won. He got the Republican nomination, and seeing as how no Democrat is running, because it would be pointless, he will be the state senator. Now, what was interesting here was that $2.5 million was spent on the campaign between these two. You couldn't watch TV after 4 o'clock without seeing ads from one or the others at every break. And it was vicious. It was horrible. This guy who had been a 14-year pro-life, everything conservative senator was being called a liberal by, and they were just, ripping each other apart. But that kind of money for a state Senate seat, that does worry me. And you know why? Because I think they're trying to take these state legislatures. And why would they do that, you ask? It's because when you want to amend the Constitution, you need the state legislatures to do that. You can actually call a constitutional convention, and I don't remember the exact number, but if you have a plurality, let's say, of the state legislatures who want to do it, they can call a constitutional convention and rewrite the thing.
Yeah.
It can be done. It can be done. And that's why I caution you, do not ignore your local races and think I'll only vote for president and senator and so forth, because that's what counts. Don't you believe it?
Absolutely.
Every office counts. From president to dog catcher, they need to be Democrats. You need to get the Republicans out of there, because right now here in Tennessee, they're impacting public education. They're going to give vouchers in the next session, I guarantee you, so that my tax dollars are going to be paying for some kid to go to a religious school or a bogus charter school where they won't be educated in either case. And that just makes for a really dumb electorate down the road. And believe me, it's pretty stupid already. They can't get much worse, but they want it to continue.
Fuck Republicans. I tell you what, Ed, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. We got a lot of other shit to talk about. So hold on. We'll be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Ed joins us as he always does. And this next subject I want to talk about, I'm a little reluctant to, because we're recording this on Friday afternoon to be listened to on Saturday. And what I want to talk about is Kamala's choice for vice president. Because we're recording this early afternoon Friday, she could announce later today who that vice presidential candidate is. And then Saturday, we'd be talking about who it might be, and she'd already announced it. So if that happens, just bear with us here. We'll talk about all the different prospects. We might even make some guesses as to who she will pick. But this has been really something that people have been debating about, who she's going to pick. There's like 6 people. There's Buttigieg, Walz, Shapiro, Kelly. Who else is there? Bashir. There's one other one, and I'm not sure. I'm not getting it. Roy Cooper's out, so it's not him.
Right.
Anyway.
I know who you mean. Yeah, I can't think of his name either. But of course, my pick is Tim Walz. I'm very impressed with the guy. The only problem is that he's the Minnesota governor, and I like him in that position. But I think he's done amazingly good things for Minnesota and would like to see him continue there. However, that said, he's also the guy who came up with weird, which is really, really rocking. It's sticking, and I like that it's sticking, that the Republican candidates are weird. Trump is weird, and J.D. Vance is weird, and they are, of course.
Yeah. Well, if you were listening leading up to us recording this show, I've heard many people say, well, it's an absolute deadlock on Shapiro. And
Mhm.
Shapiro would be a fine choice. He's from Pennsylvania. And people seem to think that that will help them win Pennsylvania. I think they're going to win it anyway. And maybe that's true. Maybe that helps. Maybe it doesn't. Um, but Shapiro's got, one of the things they want to avoid is any kind of flare ups of scandals and that sort of thing, or just noise. People talk about some of his comments about Israel and the Gaza thing. He made some pretty.
Yeah.
He regarded the protesters that were protesting for Gaza as similar to those being in the KKK. That's a little strong. Probably not the best thing he ever said. And then there's also one other thing that I just heard about earlier before we went on the show. Apparently, there's a women's group that's pushing back against Shapiro because there was some sexual harassment problems within his administration. Not him, he wasn't
Yeah.
involved in it, but they question as to how he handled that. Now, I don't know if he
Yeah.
handled it badly or not, but the fact that it's out there and making noise, that may cause the Democrats to step back from that just to avoid any kind of bullshit in this home stretch here.
Yeah. I think he's a really good candidate, and I would accept him. I do think there's something to be said for balancing a ticket, though. And here you have what has proved to be a very attractive candidate that people are warming to and are have seemed to have a great deal of confidence in. She is very adept at campaigning. Women love her. Young people love her. And then you got to be very careful how you balance that. With Tim Walz, you got a guy who I think has a very appealing personality. He's also sharp as a tack, and he's been able to take a state which has a very strong Republican presence. Let's face it. I
Right.
mean, people who don't know Minnesota don't realize you've got Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, that are kind of the seats of liberalism, and maybe Duluth, part of it anyway. And then you got everybody else, and everybody else tends to be more conservative out
Right.
there. And in a way that's almost a metaphor for the country, because we got the same thing in the country. We got liberal cities, and the hinterland is red, right?
Right.
Um, um, so I I lean not toward Shapiro because he did make some rather strong statements. And let me just divert for a second on this. Okay, when it comes to Gaza and Israel, it's a very touchy thing. Everybody has an opinion on it. I understand it. I was outraged by the attacks on Israel. I'm equally outraged by the way Israel has attacked the Gaza Strip, and so brutally, and ignoring civilian casualties, seeming to wanting to incur civilian casualties, trying to get them to turn against Hamas, whatever. I don't know what their strategy is exactly. It makes no sense to me. It pisses me off when I see the media attacking the protesters for the residents of Gaza, particularly on the college campuses, because I lived through this in a different context, and that was Vietnam. And the protests on college always have to do with one thing, and it's not saying everybody in Israel is awful and everybody in Gaza is good. No, what we're saying is the university is taking the money that I paid in tuition and investing it in Israel, in the company, in the country that is basically engaged in genocide. All they're arguing for is divestment, just like they did against South Africa. That's what's going on the campuses. And people who can't see that need to take a stronger look, because I've seen a lot of liberal commentators and people in the middle who are they're on the side of Hamas. No, they're not. They're on the side of humanity. Cut them some slack. They're trying to get their universities to divest from Israel. That's what it's about.
I try to break things down for myself to make it simple because I have a simple mind, and I have nothing against people in Gaza. I have nothing against the people of Israel. Who I do have something against is Hamas. It's a terrorist organization. And
Yes.
Benjamin Netanyahu is
Yeah.
basically Israel's version of Donald Trump. Now, when we had
Right.
Donald Trump as a president, he did some horrible things. That didn't make me or you horrible. And
Right.
it's the same thing with Netanyahu. We've got two people at the top of the pyramid fighting, and everybody else is fucking collateral damage. I'm not for Israel over Gaza or Gaza over Israel. I'm for the people, innocent people that are suffering because of this organization and Netanyahu and his organization causing all this shit. It doesn't have to be like this. We could come to terms. Joe Biden has come out with some plans for a ceasefire, and one side or the other messes it up constantly. I don't know what Joe Biden can do any more than he's done, but it's not the people of Israel. It's not the people of Gaza. These poor people are just collateral damage to fucking nutcases.
Absolutely. And you have to believe that the strike against the chief Hamas negotiator, blowing him up with a bomb in Iran was Netanyahu's way of torpedoing any sort of settlement.
Right.
You don't blow up the chief negotiator if you want to keep talking, do you?
No, no, you don't. I want to get back to the vice presidential thing because, like I said, it's Friday when we're recording this.
Right.
Kamala could come out later after we get done recording this and announce who her vice presidential candidate. So I want to be on the record. First, I thought it would be Shapiro. Now I'm thinking there's maybe a little too much in there that might cause problems. And they got 3 months. You don't want to try to fight against a problem in just 3 months. And then there's Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly seems like a great prospect because he's in a border state. He's a former astronaut. He's a military guy. He pushed back against Biden group about the border thing. So he's a nice balance and he's a little more conservative. My problem with Mark Kelly, though, is this this ticket with Kamala in front of it has got a lot of personality,
Right.
interacting with people. And he's not that guy. If you notice, he's one of the few, he's been the one that really hasn't been speaking out that much. I think
Right.
Pete Buttigieg is too young. They probably have other plans down the road for him and maybe on the administration and the cabinet or something, staying where he is or getting a higher role. Uh, I personally think, as I look at it, my gut guess right now is it's going to be Tim Walz. And I only have one reservation about Tim Walz. Tim Walz is like Kamala in the sense people love him.
Yeah.
Kids love him. Adults love him. And he has that warm personality and it fits with Kamala better.
Yeah.
The only thing I have a reservation about is, and I'm sure they're talking about this, Kamala's perceived as liberal, maybe not progressive, but liberal,
Yeah.
more left than center. Tim Walz can be characterized as a progressive with all the things he got done in the state of Minnesota. So now we've got two liberals. Does that put off the centrist Democrats? I don't know. And is that even an issue to be concerned about in this day and age when we're so radically right? Maybe we have to go way left.
I think it's time to go way left. I
I do.
do.
I do too. I do too. To get us back to center.
Exactly. This is exactly right. I mean, Joe was centrist until he came in and he governed as a liberal.
Right.
And he got stuff done. He got
Well,
important stuff done. And as you said before, history will treat him very well.
well, and why did he go so liberal when he was a centrist? Because he saw what was going on. They went way fucking right. They swerved to the right ditch. And he knew in order to bring them back, he had to kind of reset the thing. He's a centrist at heart, but he had to go left to pull them out of the fucking right ditch.
Exactly. And I just noticed this morning they voted down the child tax credit again. And two surprising people, well, maybe not. One of them, Joe Manchin, sided with the Republicans to vote it down. So did Bernie Sanders, which surprised me because Bernie, of course, very liberal. But then I realized I did some reading, and Bernie voted against it because this can be revisited fairly soon, right after the election.
Right.
He voted against it because it would have left in place the Trump tax cuts.
Oh,
So he voted against that because these have to be reversed. Otherwise, you and I are paying while the rich people get a tax cut.
Right.
and ours go up twice more in this decade, whereas theirs come down. So that's
Right.
what Bernie wants to address, and he could not do that by voting for this bill. It's a shame because the child tax credit lifted more children out of poverty in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. Well, the first year of the Biden administration. I guess it was first two. Then it was put in as a COVID response to give people money, and and it worked. It lifted children out of poverty. I'm for that. That's what we take money from rich people and give it to the poor for. Okay, it's a Robin Hood gesture, and I support it.
I just want to say about Tim Walz too, why I would think he would be the vice presidential candidate, because I think plucking him out of Minnesota does less harm than anywhere else in the country. I mean, even
Yeah,
Shapiro, he's only been a governor for a short time. He's popular, but again, he's new to this in that level. So you don't know what's going to come up. Tim Walz has got to be as clean a motherfucker as there is. He was a teacher,
yeah,
he was a football coach, he was in the National Guard, he was in Congress, he was the governor. And there's never been a hint of any kind of scandal around
no,
him. He's a good, solid Midwestern guy who happens to be bright and a quick wit and a stinging tongue occasionally when it comes to the Republicans. But some of these other people, they all come with issues. And I just see Walz and Kamala getting to whoever takes the job too has to be able to take the back seat and be in the
yeah,
shadows because
yeah.
she is a force to be reckoned with, and they should let her roll. That person should not be a detriment to her, and somebody like Walz would not be a detriment to her. I don't think he's worried about getting to the next rung and getting to the presidency. Somebody like Shapiro might, Kelly might. I don't know. I just have a better sense about Walz, and he might be a safer bet all around.
Absolutely. Also, he's been a teacher, and I respect teachers greatly. Teachers gave me the lease on life that allowed me to prosper, and I support them. And it's always a sacrifice to be a teacher. You know that your wife is a teacher.
Right.
Teachers spend their own money. They do think they work long hours. They try to help every kid. Teachers are my heroes, and if to have a teacher in the White House would be my greatest joy, and so I would support him all the way.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. And now, of course, you'll pick somebody else, and tomorrow you were wrong. Well, of course I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the
Yeah,
fucking time. I have
right.
no fear in being wrong. I'm just trying to analyze this the best I can and try to get in the heads. I heard something recently. The Democrats in Congress are kind of getting behind this Tim Walz thing too.
Yeah,
Um, people will say, well, if we pick Shapiro, then they'll easily win Pennsylvania. And that may be true. But as I've said in previous shows, I don't know that picking a vice president to win a swing state is really a thing. I mean, we go back to Obama. He picked
hmm,
Biden not because he wanted to win Delaware or he was desperate to win
right.
Delaware. He did it because he was an inexperienced guy by by comparison, and he needed somebody who knew what the fuck was up with foreign policy and all this stuff, and he picked the right guy, and it obviously worked out well. And I think that has to come into play more importantly than whether they'll get a swing state. And now the polls are going up in some of these states where it's not as big an issue as it was maybe 2 weeks ago.
Right. Yeah, I can understand, and like I say, I will not go sulk if Shapiro is the pick. I will not go sulk if Andy Bashir is the pick or Pete
No,
Buttigieg. I think Pete Buttigieg will be president someday. I
I do
really
too.
do.
I do too.
He's the only one with enough guts to go on Fox News and make them look like the idiots they are, and without raising his voice. The guy is sharp, and quite frankly, it's time to have um, uh, 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 someone like Pete, who represents a different part of the electorate. He's
Right.
gay, okay,
Well, right,
and
he's
it's
gay.
time. It's time. It's time for that, and it's time for pushback on that. I mean, I'm sorry that you're for the people who have to take some ancient document that's been mistranslated a billion times and come up with something to try to tar people who are just trying to live their lives. I'm so sick of that crap. That it is time. We need a good example on the national scene. Pete is a good representative, and
I agree.
he's
He might be president someday. He certainly has all the tools. I will say this: pre 2015, if somebody came to you and I said, "Well, it's not time for a black or a black woman to be president or a gay person to be vice president," at that time I would have agreed with you. But right now, at this moment in time, with all that's going on, I don't really think that matters much anymore. And the reason it doesn't matter much is because this big influx of younger people, the
right.
non-boomers don't give a shit about that, whether she's black or white or South Asian or gay or whatever. I just don't think that's a big issue to them.
No, it isn't. It's a non-issue to them, and as a matter of fact, it pisses most of them off if they are not influenced by that same religious uh, ridiculousness that seeks to tar people of a different sexual orientation as somehow evil. No, the kids grew up in even the kids who were around when we were working at the same radio station. We had a big student population there involvement. They had already gotten way past that.
Yeah.
And I was quite frankly surprised when I went into that environment and found how easy they were with people of different sexual orientations. They saw no problem with it, and they've grown up and they still don't.
Well, and the other thing I've said about Kamala, not only she's black, South Asian, and she's a woman, and that's weird for somebody running for the president after all these years. But I think even beyond whether it's acceptable, I think she is the exact right person at the exact right time to do it because this election is about a war against women and children, LGBTQ folks. This is a war against them. That's what the Republicans are mounting. And what better way than to have a strong woman of color to knock them down? I think this is a very opportune time for Kamala Harris. Any time previous to this particular date, she might have had trouble winning the presidency, but she's got all kinds of support. And I think this is the right person at the right time.
I do too. She's sharp and she's attractive and she is very well spoken. She's brilliant. I mean, she obviously has a tremendous intellect. Everything going for her, and it's never the right time till it is.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and it is. It is right now.
Well, and the thing about it is, I think the big thing that's been the change from Biden to Kamala. Biden's a great president. There's no question about that. He's got the tools, but his personality is such where he's more laid back. He's not confrontational. He's not going to get in somebody's face. And unfortunately, we have an opponent who does all those things. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the only way to combat that is somebody with a similar or better ability. Joe never had that. Even when he was young,
No.
he was not that kind of guy.
No.
Kamala is, but Kamala's been able to do something that most women up to date, up to this point, like Hillary, haven't been able to do. She's been able to be tough, sharp tongue, be on the offense, attack. But people aren't saying, "Oh, there's an angry black woman," or "There's a bitchy white woman," or "a bitchy woman in general." She's been able to somehow balance being tough but being likable, approachable, and warm and friendly. And that is a true talent because that's
Yes, it
always been a
is.
trouble for women. They couldn't be tough at work because they would get this perception that they were ice queens or something. She doesn't have that at all. People love her like they love Joe Biden.
Yeah, and all of this race baiting and DEI crap that Trump is throwing at her is only backfiring on him. People see
Yeah.
him as just this. I think people are starting. The scales are falling from their eyes, and they're starting to see him for the first time for the liar and the grifter and the cheat and the bully that he is. Because it's the contrast, quite frankly. You have this dynamic woman who represents everything that's good in American culture, and you have this festering toad over here that anybody can see. He's Jabba the Hutt with a bad toupee. That's Trump.
Well, I think Trump knows he's a vile piece of shit, but up to now, he's been able to keep just the people who support him to focus on him. He goes to rallies where he's well received. He goes on Fox News or OAN or Newsmax, so he can incite the people that support him already. Now he's having to go out in a wider range of folks. We see him and we hate him because he's crazy. But then these people who supported him are seeing that response, and that has to change their minds. He's being opened up to a wider range of people. And instead of the Fox News people getting one version and the MSNBC News getting one version, everybody's getting everything, especially like with that interview with the black journalist. That was news everywhere. Everybody saw it. And people were trying to explain it away from Fox News to other people, and they just looked silly doing it. They were
Yeah.
shitting on themselves trying to explain it away. It didn't work.
And the follow up to that is, I don't know if you were watching this morning, but on every channel I saw, they had video of him testifying before a gaming commission,
Right.
complaining that the people who ran the Indian casinos didn't look like Indians, right? And they don't look like Indians to me. He's been online saying he didn't want black guys to count his money. He wanted little guys in beanies to count his money. I mean, the guy's a walking racist. Everything that comes out of his mouth is racist, right? So people are finally noting that, and they're going back and finding this stuff and putting it out there. That has to have an effect.
And you know what the big difference here is? It goes back to what we were talking about before. Donald Trump was the dancing monkey, the media darling. They put him out there. They didn't push back against him. They didn't do anything. They just let him do what he did so that they could make money and gain viewers. But now that's not popular to do anymore. It's more popular to tear him down, which the media and people will always do. So now the course is to tear him down and expose him for the craziness and the racism. I mean, the racism with Donald Trump has been going on for decades. This just didn't happen. He's been doing it for decades. But now that he's being exposed for what he is, that just shows what I was saying before. The descent has started, and he's close to the fucking crashing point, because as he gets more pressure, he's not used to getting pressure. He's used to being the media darling. When the media turns against him and the people start to turn against him, that's when he goes crazy, because he's literally fighting for his life at this point.
Yeah, and it's good. I actually saw someone that I know casually posting a thing about him the other day that said, "Well, I never really liked Trump. I just like his policies." Number one, he doesn't have policies. All Trump is a mouth, and other people put in the policies. Okay, he has no policies. He has no grasp of policy. So, but that's a change. I never really liked Trump, but I liked his policies. By next week, it will be, well, give this Kamala a chance, maybe. At least I hope, because the person I'm talking about is rational to a point.
Right. And they don't like to be on the side of losers. And when it becomes obvious that Donald Trump is going to lose, they're going to want to step away from it. But my problem with that is we're going to hear a lot of Trump-lefucks, hardcore Trump-lefucks, that say, "Yeah, I never liked Trump." I'm sorry, yeah. I know you did, and I'm not going to let you off the hook. If it were just a political argument between a Republican and a Democrat, policies and all that stuff, that's one thing. You can forgive that and move on. But these people were trying to destroy the country, trying to overturn elections, undermine democracy, overthrow the government, and make things worse for our kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids. That's hard to forgive.
Absolutely. And what it comes down to, the Republican Party is going to have to do some real soul searching and come up with, decide what they're for, because all they're for right now is giving rich people money. That's all they're for. That's all the Republican platform, everything about it is for give rich people money. They use religious buzzwords and so forth to stir up the base to vote for Republicans, but they don't care about that. They don't care about abortion. They don't care about books. They don't care about any of that stuff. It's just something they can use to influence someone. They have nothing that they can actually point to with pride and say, this is what we're for. We support this. You just can't do that with, we like to give rich people money, because maybe they'll give us a little of it. That's their platform.
Well, it really is. You know, it's funny. Joe Biden has stepped aside. He's not in the race anymore, but I think he's going to be pretty pivotal in this race between now and November. He's going to continue being successful at some of the things he does. And then maybe toward the end, when he gets close to the election or just after the election, there's going to be some executive orders where he's going to change some shit. And presuming that he's going to come out with a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, nobody's going to try to shut those down. That's typically what happens. A Democratic president is in, they have some executive orders, and then the Republican comes in, they shut all those down. He'll be in a position to make executive orders and be able to substantiate that with votes in Congress after it's done. So he might as well do that. Give him a head start. Get him on the ground running right off the bat.
Yeah, and once again, I have to go back to this, folks. You got to get out and vote, and you've got to vote all the way down the ticket, because we need the House.
Right.
This would have been a much more successful presidency if we had had a House of Representatives that was not purely obstructionist.
Right.
Nothing happened. Nothing happened that Joe could maneuver around, because the House said, no, we're not going to do anything except hold bogus investigations. I want to say something about that too in a minute. But, that's all that's happened. That's all that's happened because they have a lock on the House. Sweep them out of there. Give Kamala the Senate and the House. There's all kinds of bills already written that just need to be put in and voted on. We can have the best 100 days that has ever been in this country since Roosevelt, since Johnson, if people just give Kamala the House and the Senate. We pretty much have the Senate. We need to hold it and add at least 4 votes.
We need to fire Mike Johnson, and I think we'll probably do that without any problem. The House looks like it's definitely going to go the way of the Democrats, and people say, well, it's iffy with the Senate. I think the Senate is going to be solid too. I've said all along, I think this election isn't about who's most popular. It's about how bad they hate Donald Trump and how bad they're afraid of Donald Trump. That we saw that in 2022. We saw that in 2021. People came out in droves only because they were afraid of Donald Trump. They didn't want him in office. Some of these people would have voted for a ham sandwich as opposed to Donald Trump. And I think that's going to play in this election. Plus, now you got an extremely popular candidate. So I don't know how this isn't a huge win for the Democrats.
Yeah, you have a popular Democratic candidate and a Republican candidate that a large portion of the country despises. So yeah, it looks good. Speaking about congressional investigations for a moment, right? I remember when they were scarce as hen's teeth.
Yeah.
You would have something like Watergate, or you'd have something, on something really big. Now we have one every week, and it's always the same idiots. Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and these people out there grandstanding and calling people on the carpet and being insulting and not letting them speak and trying to put words in their mouth and so forth. And all they're doing it for is to aggrandize themselves, to make themselves look tough and to make themselves look like they actually are doing something when they don't. They're not offering any bills. They're not doing anything to help their constituents. They're just there saying, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm here. I'm at work, and it's all bullshit because they never do anything with it. They hold their investigations and nothing happens. It's a waste of time, a waste of money. They should be banned.
Well, we've got another test coming up too. In September, there's a vote on the budget again. And we know how those budget votes have gone. I've always said each time previous, and I'll say it again, They will walk it down to the last minute of the last day, and they'll come up with some kind of resolution to it. And this is even a tougher situation. So you got some people want to shut down the country. Go ahead, Republicans, shut down the country in fucking September. See how that
Yeah.
does for you in the election. I mean, we
Yeah.
knew it was going to affect you in the election anyway, but we've got some October surprises then. You want to shut down the country? Shut down the country. Donald Trump's going to get sentenced in September. We got all kinds of October surprises coming early.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I expect that it will be a fairly quiet go right on through. That's it. I mean,
That may be.
it may be because I want to keep getting my Social Security check. That's what I'm hoping for. But at the same time, that would be the nail in the coffin for the Republican Party to shut the government down. It would be.
Well, the Republican Party seems to have this feeling, like with Roe v. Wade and some of these other things, that we can do something fucked up, but people will just forget about it. People are stupid. Well, that didn't happen with Roe v. Wade. It's going to impact 2024's election, but the same with the shutting down the government. You may think they'll forget about it, but not in a month. They're not going
Yeah.
to forget about it after 1 month, and it's going to hurt them incredibly. We don't want it. The problem with that is if they do that and they hurt themselves, that's fine, but it helps a lot of normal or hurts a lot of normal people too. So hopefully you're right that they'll do it quietly and just get it passed and get it done. That's how it used to go. There was never a fight every time they passed the budget bill. It was just kind of, okay, we negotiate this out, rubber stamp, send it down the road. But since the Republicans and MAGA have been involved, it's all about creating chaos. And it'll be interesting to see if they want to continue that chaos this close to the election.
Yeah. The other thing I wonder about. Do you think they chose J.D. Vance? I mean, I understand that it was the Trump kids who talked him into that, but the Republican leadership, whatever you want to call them, the people behind the scenes, they have to realize Trump will not finish one term.
No.
Trump will not live 4 more years. I predict that. One way or the other, he's going to take a dirt bath before if he got elected. So, do they really think J.D. Vance is their guy?
I tell you what I think happened. It's like what's happened all along since Donald Trump has been in office and since he's been out of office and since he's been a defendant. They all do this. They'll advise Donald Trump on what to do is right, and Donald Trump would say, "No, I know better. This is what we're
Yeah,
going to do," and shove it down their throat. He does it to his own lawyers. He does it to
true.
Congress, and his sons came to him with J.D. Vance. Oh, he's a young guy. He looks good on TV. He wrote a big book that turned into a movie. He's the right guy. And Donald Trump Jr. and Eric know how to manipulate the dumb fuck because
Yeah.
he's easy. He's a narcissist. And they got him to take JD Vance. And JD Vance or Donald Trump just said, okay, we're doing it. And I don't give a fuck if you don't like it. I'm doing it my way. And that's what I think really happened.
I wondered if the money had something to do with it. I know he was counting on the tech guys for a lot of money, uh,
Probably.
and they were pushing Vance because I mean the thing about the tech guys, they're very good at certain things and they're awful at everything else. I mean,
True.
they are borderline, classic nerd dysfunctional.
Idiot
Um,
savants.
yeah, in that way, and I don't think I think they're so geared into the technical, the money, whatever it may be, that they have no concept of history or anything else, or realize even how the economies work or anything. All they know is they make money. So maybe they pushed him too. I don't know, but whatever reason, he is. I don't think if Trump kicked over, if they got in office, God forbid, Trump kicked over, which he will, and then Vance is there with absolutely no idea of how anything works. I don't think he would survive more than one term anyway. It just seems like a very, very strange choice. Uh, Not to give many ideas, but if Trump had had any sense at all, he would have mended fences with Nikki Haley and said, "Hey, we love each other again. It was a big misunderstanding," and that actually would have helped him.
Yeah, but she's brown and her parents are immigrants. That's a non-starter for Republicans. They're never going to
Yeah,
have somebody who isn't pasty white running for them. It's just not going to fucking happen. Nikki Haley, if she wants a career, she should maybe think about joining a new party, whatever that is, or getting in with the Democrats. But I think she's done too much damage to herself. I think she's done in politics after this, to be perfectly
yeah.
honest with you.
This isn't original to me, but I saw it the other day and it rang true. When people with an ethnicity that people might find troubling run on the Republican side, Raphael Cruz becomes Ted Cruz. And I forget her real name, but Nikki Haley becomes Nikki, and it's not her real last name either. You know, she becomes Nikki Haley. Barack Obama ran as Barack Obama, and Kamala is running as Kamala. You
And
know,
I and
it's honest. It is honest.
well, and JD's changed his name like three times. JD's
Yes.
changed his name three times. I just have this question based on Donald Trump's observation of or not Nikki Haley, Kamala. Um, my heritage is Swedish, Norwegian, and German. So, am I black or South Asian? I'm not sure which one I am. It's fucking ridiculous.
No kidding. Yeah. Well, I'm Irish. I mean, I'm Scottish on one side and Welsh on the other. So I'm as British Isles as you can get, you know, with probably a little bit of France thrown in there. Somebody who came over during the invasion, you know, of Norman French. There's a little bit of that mixed in too. But
Well, what's interesting is I don't know if this is absolutely true, but I've heard it reported on a couple of occasions. Donald Trump's mom was born in Scotland.
yeah,
She wasn't born in this country.
no.
And we know that Fred Trump or his predecessors were kind of tied in with Nazis a little bit, much
Well,
like
yeah,
George Bush's family was.
yeah. Well, his grandfather was born in Germany. His father was born in Queens. But yeah, and he was very much into the. Um, I think Grandpa left Germany to get out of the draft.
Yeah, I think so
You
too.
know that I'm pretty sure that was the case there. But you know, there were a lot of people in the early part of the country. I mean, in the early part of the 20th century, who very much, you know, I mean, if you followed Rachel Maddow's shows and so forth, you
Right.
realize just how many of them, Henry Ford and various others, most of the industrialists of the time, DuPont and so forth, were really big fans of Hitler, just like Trump is now a big fan of Putin, and so seemingly so are they. They just love fascists and they just love authoritarians
Well, even
because
my
actually, what's his face, the guy who came up with the term, the Italian guy Mussolini,
right.
his original definition was the fascism was the merger of the government and the corporation.
Well, even my Minnesota homie was into Hitler, and that is Charles Lindbergh.
Oh yeah, big time.
He was big
Big,
time. Yeah.
you know.
And it was kind of normalized back then. We were a younger country, and they saw what was going on in Germany. I remember I had a house that my wife's grandfather built. We lived in Golden Valley, Minnesota, a suburb, and we were taking out a wall. And this house was built in 1938. And back in those days, believe it or not, they insulated the house with newspapers.
Newspapers, yeah.
So these newspapers would be stretched out against the beams, and I'd pull them down, and I thought it was hilarious. I'm reading this newspaper from 1938, a Minneapolis newspaper, and it's basically saying, "This Hitler guy, we better watch him." Just,
Yeah.
but there were supporters too, and this is something we've gone through an entire history. There's always a faction of people that are the evil side because they see how it's going to benefit them. They don't see, they don't care if it benefits the average person. And that's what I like about Joe Biden and Kamala. They finally get it after all these decades of politicians in the pockets of all these rich people. These two finally get it that if you cultivate the middle class, we are going to flourish. It only makes sense.
Yes. Exactly. And that's what I was talking about before. We had 25 good years, 1948 to 1973, in which the middle class was ascended. After that, it started falling off again. That's it in the history of this country for the middle class to be actually comfortable and ascended and creating wealth, individual and family wealth, I should say, that they could pass on to their progeny. 25 years. That's it in the whole history of the country. Never before that, never after that. We got to get back. That's the sweet spot. 1948 to 1973. And this time we got to make it for everybody, because that was only for white people, mind
Right.
you, and
Right.
only mostly for white males. So we got to get back to that sweet spot, but we got to include women and minorities this time. And then it will be as close to heaven on earth as you can get. So that's what we have to aim for.
And one of the things I've always said to my kids, I said, you got to be able to recognize opportunities and you got to grab those opportunities. And right now, for the first time, and since I've been alive, we have politicians in Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and some of the other Democrats and some of the young people that finally are willing to take that option. I mean, we've had Democrats before that were all about helping the rich and filling their pockets. For once, we have somebody who is going to try to cultivate the middle class. So this is an opportunity we must grasp and grasp hard, because we may not get this opportunity again.
Absolutely. Not to in any way besmirch Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, but they were transition figures.
Right.
They had to find a way again to keep the Democratic Party viable, and with the demise of the unions and so forth, and find another way to find power again. So I salute them. And Joe had a lot to do with Barack Obama's success as well
Absolutely.
in recovery from the Great Recession that Republicans put us in. But then when Joe became president for the very first time, we had with him and having the Senate and the House, at least to begin with, that he was able to accomplish in those first 2 years, bringing us out of COVID, saving us from a recession, putting us on track to have the best economy in the world in just 2 years before the Republicans took back the House. He was able to do all of that because he had the tools to work with. Give those to Kamala, we're home free.
Right.
We can have 4 Democratic administrations in a row, 4 Democratic presidencies in a row. If we can do that, we can get back to that sweet spot.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned Clinton and Barack Obama, and they were transitional in the sense they wanted to make change, but they still had to play the game to remain viable.
Right.
But the one good thing that Donald Trump did, he came in, he broke the fucking game. So we get to make more rules, and that's what we're doing now, and that's what's incumbent on us to make sure the game stays broken from what it was, and we do change the rules, and that looks like what's coming.
Right. And we have to be bold. We can't say, well, we can't move too fast. We can't do too much. We got to go. We got to go for it. Just like Roosevelt did. We got to go for it. Make the rules as you go, because you're working for the country. You're working for the working people. You're working for the middle class. You are taking it from the upper crust, because believe me, they took it. It's time to take it back.
Right.
Okay. And to serve, to raise up those below, raise all boats. And I mean, we can take all that we want from the really rich, and they will still be really rich.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They're not going to suffer. But we need to spread it out. We need to hit that sweet spot.
The Democrats need something they've never had, and they're starting to get. We need that killer instinct. We need to kick them when they're down, and we need to finish them. Because if we leave one little speck, it's like cancer growing again, and we've got to eradicate that cancer from our society and from our government so that we can start to heal.
Right, and they've told us what they want. They want some sort of they want the same situation we had in the Middle Ages. They called it the Dark Ages because the church and the fascists were in power. That's what they want again, right?
Exactly.
They want this. They want the Dark Ages come home again. We say no.
Absolutely. Well, Ed, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. I know you're a busy man. You got all kinds of shit going on. It's like George Costanza on Seinfeld. I got stuff going. You don't even notice I've got it going. So
I
and I'm
got a
sure you,
dog that wants to walk right now.
well, Jesus Christ. Yeah, well, let's get that done. Ed, thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate it immensely. And if you like, I don't know when it's coming up, but that Dr. Arlene Unfiltered, that's going to be a show to listen to because she knows way more than I do. And she's going to be very helpful to a lot of folks. And that's why I have my guests. I always have guests on that are smarter than me because then I look good. I
Present
just,
company accepted, right?
well, no, you're older, so you're more experienced. I just kind of say, how about those taxes? Go.
Now, uh, just time for a little self-aggrandizement. Visit me
Absolutely.
at Holler Troll on TikTok and give me a follow if you would. I don't put stuff up every day, but I do try to put up something of substance at least once or twice a week. So
Right.
yeah, give me a follow and then you can see it all. That's at HOLLERTROLL on TikTok at Holler Troll.
If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't checked out Ed's account as yet, what the fuck is wrong with you? What do I got to do? We got to pay you? Just go listen to Ed at Holler Troll, and you're on YouTube too. That's
Yeah, I haven't done much on YouTube lately for some. I have to edit more, and I haven't. I had to get a new phone, and I'm still putting software on and different things. So yeah, I haven't done much on um, YouTube lately. But
well,
yeah, check me out on TikTok.
well, and I would say this: we should be grateful that we're talking to Ed, a man in his 70s, and we don't have to try to figure out how to do this on a fucking flip phone. So good for
Yeah.
you to be progressive here in terms of your technology. Um, for those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.